Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg and I am here today to do my book haul for the month of February. This year I had been planning on having smaller book hauls and being a lot more intentional with the books that I bring into my library. This is something that has grown out of being on BookTube for 3 years and the book haul revisits that I have done, which have made me try to think about how I spend money on books and what I bring into my library. I had a lot of success with that last month in January. And I will put a link to January's book haul in the description box down below. This month is going to be a bit of a different story, and Jamie can attest to that. I have a lot of books to talk to you about. I'm excited about all of these books, and I think even through the lens of being really intentional about the books that I bring into my library, I'm still not doing badly. It's a lot of books, but they're all things I want to read. Some of them are library builders, and 4 of them were sent to me by Erica from The Broken Spine. We did a book exchange. So I didn't spend money on 4 of them other than the shipping to send her 4 books of mine. So I'm going to get to the ones that she sent me at the end, and we're going to start with some of the purchases. Let's kind of dive in and start with one that has a really, really beautiful cover and which grew out of the January book haul that I did, because in January, you may recall, I hauled Still Life by Sarah Winman, and I had gotten access to that one and purchased it because I've heard good things about it, but really I had heard good things about Tin Man by Sarah Winman, and the comments about this book were just glowing. So I felt like I had to get myself a copy of this book, and here it is, and it is just stunning in terms of appearance. I don't know how well this comes across, but it has this sort of bronze colored embossing foil on the front that shimmers like waves. It is shaped like waves every time you move it, and it is just a gorgeous book, and it has a really soft cover that's fun to feel. So aesthetically, it's a very pleasing book. One of the prompts for the Montana Book Company Reading Challenge for 2022 is to choose a book based on the cover. Had I known what this looked like, this would have been my choice for that, but the photo online does not do this justice. It's just gorgeous. So I chose a different book based on the cover when I was at Montana Book Company earlier in this month. So that will be the next one that I talk about. Had I known how pretty this is, I probably would have done it for that. As it stands, it's just a really pretty book. And I've heard a lot of really good things about it. Actually, a friend of mine in town saw my book haul where I talked about Still Life and looked into Tin Man and just finished reading it and told me that she absolutely loved it. So I'm even more excited to get to this one. This is published by Putnam. The premise is that Ellis and Michael meet when they are 12 years old. They become incredibly close friends, and that friendship eventually becomes something more. But many years later, Michael is out of sight and Ellis is married to a woman named Annie. I believe the novel is about what happens in the years in between. I've heard it's emotionally devastating, but beautiful and really good, and I'm very excited to get to it. Now, in all of my book hauls, I read a little bit of the opening of the book, not a lot. I used to only do the first sentence, but sometimes I go a little bit longer now. We'll just see how much of the beginning strikes me. Chapter 1 is 1950. All Dora Judd ever told anyone about that night 3 weeks before Christmas was that she won the painting in a raffle. She remembered being out in the back garden as lights from the Cowley car plant spilled across the darkening sky, smoking her last cigarette, thinking there must be more to life. Back inside, her husband said, "Bloody move it, will you?" And she said, "Give it a rest, Len." And she began to undo her house dress as she made her way upstairs. In the bedroom, she looked at herself sideways in the mirror, her hands feeling for the progression of her pregnancy. This new life she knew was a son. That is the beginning of Tin Man by Sarah Winman. Really excited to get to this at some point this year, and it's just a pretty, pretty book. So the next book is the one that I did actually choose based on the cover, and it actually has a fun little tie back to this channel. It is The 30 Names of Night by Zeyn Joukhadar. The tie back to this channel is that it had seemed familiar when I picked it up, and I couldn't quite think of it. And the plot of the book sounded vaguely familiar, and I couldn't really think of it. I posted the photo of it on Instagram, and Sean the Book Maniac commented, reminding me that this was one of the books for the blind page 112 challenge that we did, where I sent him the page 112 of 3 different books, and he sent me ones, all themed around Pride. And I'll put a link to that video in the description box down below if you'd like to check it out. So I read page 112 of this one. I haven't actually looked back to see what I thought of it at the time based on just that one page of the book. But anyway, I actually have the book here now. And as I was walking through Montana Book Company, I kind of had it in my mind that I needed to choose a book based on its cover. And I saw this faced out, picked it up. I kind of knew just from the cover design that this was going to be the one. It also has a really pretty, there's kind of Sanskrit writing along the spine as well. And then when I picked it up, I saw the Stonewall Book Award logo on the front, which has not really let me down in the past. So this wing image is kind of what drew me in. That made me even more intrigued. And then I read the back of the book, and within a couple of sentences, I was like, okay, this is the one that I'm going to read based on the cover because it looks stunning, that's appealing, and so is this. So here it is. This is published by Atria, and it follows a Syrian-American trans boy who searches for a new name. He is haunted by the ghost of his mother, who died in a suspicious fire, and he uncovers a journal by an artist named Layla Z, which ties back to his family in unexpected ways. This leads to revelations about family, silence, and survival within his community. So I'm really excited about this. Let's do the opening of the 30 Names of Night. Even the interior of this book is really pretty. So chapter 1. Tonight, 5 years to the day since I lost you, 48 white-throated sparrows fall from the sky. Tomorrow, the papers will count and photograph them, arrange them on black garbage bags, and speculate on the causes of the blight. But for now, here on the roof of Teta's apartment building, the sheen of evening rain on the tar paper slicks the sole of my sneakers, and velvet arrows drop one by one from the autumn migration sweeping over Borum Hill. That is the beginning of the 30 Names of Night, which I will be reading this year as part of my reading challenge for the Montana Book Company. The next one I'm really excited about. It was one of my most anticipated books of 2022, and I'll put a link to that video in the description box down below if you would like to check it out. And I'm even more excited about Don't Cry for Me by Daniel Black now because Joel just finished reading this book, and actually Erica from The Broken Spine also just finished reading this book, and they were both loving it so much that they ended up having conversations with each other about the book, and it turned into a buddy read kind of on the fly, and I couldn't participate because I haven't started it yet, and now I have serious FOMO about that. So I am really looking forward to this. This is published by Hanover Square Press. Again, it was one of my most anticipated books of the year, so I was already excited about it, but the fact that they both loved it so much has me even more eagerly anticipating when I will read this book. Now, in it, a father is writing letters from his deathbed to make amends with his estranged gay son. And I don't know if I need to say more because I feel like just that sentence alone kind of lets you know why I'm so interested in this book. That immediately hooked me. But what makes it even better for me is that in these letters, the father reveals the family's generational trauma to his son, and the novel ultimately explores forgiveness and healing and reconciliation, which are topics I really like. I am fascinated by the idea of generational trauma in books as well, and since the father and the son are both Black, that kind of kicks it up another notch, so I'm really looking forward to this book. Let's do the opening of it. Okay, chapter 1, November 12th, 2003. Dear Isaac, for a life like mine, there is no redemption. I wish I was old. Dying ain't so bad if a man is old, but when he's my age, 62, it's a sad and pitiful thing. If I was 80, I could die in peace. 80's a good dying age, but a man in his 60s should still have his strength, his good senses. My strength is practically spent. Every day, cancer consumes a little more of it, leaving me to wonder when it'll run out altogether. My mind, however, is still with me, so I should say some things while I can. And that is the beginning of Don't Cry for Me, a novel by Daniel Black, which I'm really looking forward to. I've seen good reviews of it in other places, but now it has a rave review from my husband Joel and from Erica, at the Broken Spine. So really looking forward to reading that one. The next book is something that I mentioned in my video about books I kind of wish I had read last year, didn't get to, and I'm kind of hoping to prioritize this year. It's Alec by William de Canzio. Now, the thing that gave me pause about this book at first is that it is a sort of sequel to Maurice, or at least an expansion on Maurice by E.M. Forster. I keep saying Maurice, and it's pronounced Morris in Britain, but I was told that it's okay, so I'm going to keep saying Maurice because I can't stop now. And actually, this is a really interesting cover as well because it has that kind of throwback vintage feel to it, which is kind of appropriate since it's an expansion on the story of Maurice. This is published by FSG, I should mention that, and I was initially very resistant to the idea of a book that builds off of Maurice because I get very protective of books that I like. So why would you feel like you need to expand on that story? The thing that swayed me is that I started hearing really great things about this book from people I trust. And that really, really got me interested in it. And I kept waiting last year for it to show up either at my library or on any of my subscription apps, and it didn't. So finally, I just ordered it and used the gift card money that I had at Montana Book Company from Christmas. And I should mention that, by the way, both of these books were also covered by my Christmas gift cards from Montana Book Company. This was, and 3 of the others were. So yes, there are a lot of books in this book haul, but I completely forgot to mention that a lot of them came from gift cards that were given to me for Christmas. So there's that. Now, in this, the way it's framed in the blurb is that E.M. Forster had originally wanted to write an epilogue for his characters at the end of Maurice, but he couldn't fathom what their lives would have been like after the Great War, World War I. So he left it alone. William de Canzio, with the benefit of many, many, many years in between, does that imagining for E.M. Forster, and what he imagines what the lives of both Maurice and Alec would be like moving forward as they build a life together. But he also imagines what Alec's life would be like leading up to the events of Maurice. So if you're unfamiliar, there's no way to talk about this book without kind of spoiling what Maurice is. So at the end of the book, Alec is a love interest for Maurice. And this book kind of imagines Alec's backstory and the future of Maurice and Alec, which sounds fascinating. So I'm really looking forward to that. E.M. Forster is a hard author to emulate and follow up on, but I've heard that this is beautiful. Chapter 1 is St. John's Bonfire, and it begins: early in the spring of 1893, in the village of Osmington in Dorset, the Scudders, Ackerman, née Prothero, from Cardiff, and her husband Elwood, the butcher, were surprised and not entirely pleased to discover that she was with child. They had believed themselves long since finished with nappies and crying spells. Fred, their baby, was nearly 10, Aderine herself 43. Moreover, the pregnancy conjured ghosts of heartbreak she believed she'd put to rest years ago. Susan, who would have been 18 now, dead in her cradle with scarlet fever, and the twin boys, stillborn, unnamed, taken from her and buried before she had seen them, as was the practice then. But come November she had cause for joy. After a straightforward labor she gave birth to a winsome infant. They christened him David Alexander, the first name for his grandfather and for the patron saint of Wales, the second for the Grand Sound. And we're going to stop there. That is the beginning of the book, Alec. The writing sounds really beautiful, so it could very well live up to E.M. Forster. I'm really looking forward to giving this a try. It's something I've kind of committed to getting in this year, which means I basically need to get at least all 4 of these in this year. And actually, the same is true of the 5th book, which is Amanda Gorman's Call Us What We Carry, a poem collection. Amanda Gorman is famous because she was the poet who got to read at Joe Biden's inauguration, kind of stole the show in her beautiful yellow coat and with her perfect enunciation and performance of her poem at the inauguration. I believe that poem is in here. And eventually she was going to release a smaller collection. It became expanded and turned into what this is. It has a gorgeous cover itself. For the Montana Book Company's Reading Challenge, I need to read a poetry collection by a BIPOC author, and Amanda Gorman is a person of color, so it fits. I am I'm always nervous about poetry because I'm just not used to it. Some of the poems in here have very different sort of outlines, I guess you would say, or formats, which is going to be interesting. I'm trying to look for some of them because I flipped through and look, there's one that's shaped a little bit like a diamond. There are ones that have, here we go, kind of like a box. It's going to be an interesting thing to read. I am always nervous about poetry, but I think this is going to be a good one. I'm trying to read more of it and expose myself to more of it over time. We'll just do the first line of the first poem, which is Ship's Manifest. Allegedly, the worst is behind us. So I'm really looking forward to this. It's another one that I have to do this year because I've committed to it for my reading challenge, and that is Amanda Gorman's Call Us What We Carry, published by Viking. The next one is What the Fireflies Knew by Kai Harris. This really jumped onto my radar because it is published by Tiny Rip Books, which I have talked about before on my channel. So I was a big fan of the podcast Two Dope Queens. One of the Dope Queens was Phoebe Robinson. On that podcast, they brought in comedians from minority groups, people of color, people of all different sexualities and gender identities, who are traditionally marginalized in the world of comedy and don't really get a whole lot of other opportunities. And that is exactly what Phoebe Robinson is doing in Tiny Rip Books. It's Tiny Reparations Books is the full name. She is trying to spotlight authors who traditionally have not been given much of a voice or much access in the publishing world. Her book from last year was the first book that they put out. This is the second. So I really wanted to support her publishing imprint, for one thing, because I think that is a really great thing to do and a really great mission statement. But the book itself does sound interesting. It is, compared to Jesmyn Ward's Salvage the Bones and Sue Monk Kidd's The Secret Life of Bees. I haven't read The Secret Life of Bees, but I have read Salvage the Bones, and that is a really great book. I'm always a little hesitant of comparisons like that, especially in new books by new authors, but sounds like this could live up to it. It's a coming-of-age story that follows sisters who are trying to make sense of the new reality that they find themselves in when they are living with their estranged grandfather after their father dies and their mother disappears. Sounds very interesting. The beginning is January 1995. I was the one who found Daddy dead, crammed in the little space where my old bike's training wheels turned rusted. I hadn't ever seen a dead body before except one funeral when all I really saw was one dead arm folded across a still chest. 'Cause Mama ain't let me get close. And sometimes, too, in the cop shows Mama loved to watch before bed, and I snuck and watched, pretending to sleep, tucked between Mama's bony elbow and fast-beating chest. But Daddy was different. His skin, once deep brown, had turned dull gray like the sky when it rains and rains, and the sun hides behind full clouds till it's too late to go out and play. And that is the beginning of What the Fireflies Knew by Kai Harris. Another one. I have to prioritize these, but I would still like to get to this at some point in 2022. The next one was not something I had really planned on, although I guess the 30 Names of Night was not also something I hadn't really planned on, but it's Waiting for Eden by Elliot Ackerman. This is published by Vintage. Chelsea from the Montana Book Company, she is one of the owners, told me about this while we were there. It sounded really interesting. I had about $16 left on the gift card that I was going to be using, and it's $16. So it just seemed like a perfect fit, and I picked it up. Now, the main character of this book, Eden, is in the burn unit of a hospital waiting to die due to injuries sustained during the Iraq War. I believe he's in a coma. So that is kind of makes it an interesting perspective for the book. His wife, Mary, is waiting with him, trying to decide if and when to take him off of life support. The narrator of the book is Eden's best friend, who was killed in the same explosion that injured Eden. And one of the things that made this appealing to me is that Vogue called Ackerman the Tim O'Brien of our era. That really caught my interest a great deal. So I am looking forward to this. No real priority on it like some of the others. Whenever I get to it, will be fine. And the beginning of the book is, I want you to understand Mary and what she did, but I don't know if you will. You've got to wonder if, in the end, you'd make the same choice, circumstances being similar, or even the same, God help you. Back when I first met her and Eden times were better, they were trying to start a family then. And months later, on that night in the Hamrin Valley, I was sitting next to Eden and luckier than him when our Humvee hit a pressure plate, killing me and everybody else. him barely surviving. That is Waiting for Eden by Elliot, Ackerman. I'm really excited about the next one, which is the last one that I purchased for myself, and then we'll get into the ones that Erica sent me. It is Gordo Stories by Jamie Cortez, which has a really fun cover, very colorful. The only thing I don't really like about it is it has deckled edges, which I'm not usually all that opposed to, except in the paperback, they kind of stick out a little bit further than the cover, so it makes it a little bit difficult to flip through the paperback, but that's fine. It's a beautiful book. It is published by Black Cat, and this jumped onto my radar because it was one of the ALA, American Library Association, notable titles announced this year, but that's for books that were published last year. So I talked about it when I did a reaction to the ALA notable titles, which I will put in the description box down below if you'd like to check that out. I used that to do something of a Pulitzer Prize prediction, although my prediction is still coming. I feel like this has spoiler potential for the Pulitzer Prize over some more notable books that were released over the last year. So again, it's a story collection, and I believe it's inspired by Jamie Cortez's own childhood. And I'm just going to tell you the description that the ALA notable list gave this, because that's really what made me urgently want to have a copy. They said, linked stories told by a fat queer kid in a 1970s migrant workers camp open doors to a world of heartache and humor. I mean, sold, right? I don't know if I need to say any more than that. Let's do the opening of this book. The first story is called The Jesus Donut, and it begins, soon as the van turns off San Juan Highway onto our dirt road, I can see the cloud of dust chasing it. Don't look like nothing special at first, just a white van changing into a dusty brown van. When it gets closer, I see it says Flower Child on the side in big curly letters. Flower Child, Flour. What does that mean? The van stops close to me and the other kids, and the driver opens the door and steps out. With his pink face, white shirt, white hair, and little mustache, he looks like Mr. Kentucky Fried Chicken. My dog Lobo doesn't like strangers, and he pulls on his chain and barks at the man. And that is the beginning of Gordo by Jamie Cortez. Very much looking forward to that one. That is one I would really like to read this year as well. Now we get into the books that Erica sent me. I'm a little torn because since I didn't spend money on these, and these are really going to be library builders that I get to whenever I feel like it, I don't know if I'm going to include them in a book haul revisit when it comes time in a year. I haven't decided on that, but I definitely want to mention them because I'm really excited about them. So the first one that Erica sent me is The Coldest Winter Ever by Sister Souljah. When I first worked at Borders, I was working at a store in the Short Hills Mall in New Jersey, which does not exist. Well, all Borders don't exist anymore, but that store closed long before Borders as a company went under. And a lot of the people I worked with were obsessed with this book, and they told me that I should read it, and I never got around to it. So when Erica was running through options, I asked her about it, and she said, hey, it's worth a try. Why don't you take it? So this is published by Washington Square Press, or at least this edition of it is, and it follows Winter, who is a street-smart daughter of a wealthy drug-dealing family in Brooklyn who finds herself desperate to stay on top. I've heard really good things about it, have never read it for myself, and it will be interesting to have the opportunity to do that. Let's do the beginning of the book. I never liked Sister Souljah, straight up. She's the type of female I'd like to cut in the face with my razor. Before I get heated just talking about her, let me make it clear who I am and where I stand. Don't go jumping to any conclusions either. All of y'all are too quick to jump to her defense without knowing what somebody up close and personal thinks. When it comes down to it, those are the ones who really count. The people who was there, who's seen it all. That is the beginning of The Coldest Winter Ever by Sister Souljah. The next book is one that I'm really excited about. It's Cain by Jean Toomer, which is a book I had never heard of, but it sounds really intriguing. This edition is published by Live Right. It is described as part drama, part poetry, and part fiction. It is a 1923 novel that was part of the Harlem Renaissance, and it is described as evoking Black life in the American South. One of the things that's really notable about this book is that it has a blurb from Maya Angelou on the back. She says, a breakthrough in prose and poetical writing, this book should be on all readers' and writers' desks and in their minds. So looking forward to this. It's not a straightforward novel, as it says. It's a fusion of a bunch of different styles, but that should be really interesting. So the first part is Corintha. Men had always wanted her, this Corintha, even as a child. Corintha carrying beauty, perfect as dusk when the sun goes down. Old men rode her hobby horse upon their knees. Young men danced with her at frolics when they should have been dancing with their grown-up girls. God grant us youth, secretly prayed the old men. The young fellows counted the time to pass before she would be old enough to mate with them. This interest of the male, who wishes to ripen a growing thing too soon, could mean no good to her. That is the beginning of Cain by Jean Toomer, which I'm really excited to try, which has a very fun cover that stands out a great deal. The next one is American Spy by Lauren Wilkinson. This was published by Random House. It's a more recent book, and it is set in 1986 when the Cold War was in full swing. American Spy follows a black intelligence officer with the FBI named Marie Mitchell, whose beliefs about what it means to be a good American are challenged when she begins a relationship with the man she is supposed to be spying on, which sounds really intriguing. Part 1, Connecticut, 1992. I unlocked the safe beneath my desk, grabbed my old service automatic, and crept toward my bedroom doorway, stealthy until I was brought to grief by a Lego Duplo that stung the sole of my foot. I hobbled the rest of the way to the door and crouched behind it. A few moments passed, just enough time for me to feel ridiculous. I told myself that what I'd heard was the house settling. That was always what it wound up being. That is American Spy by Lauren Wilkinson, which sounds very interesting. The final book is another one that's exciting. So I read Passing by Nella Larsen last year, and I mentioned to Erica that I had wanted to have a copy. She was looking to unload a copy because she has multiple, so she was going to send me one, but instead she sent me a version that has the complete works of Nella Larsen. It has Passing, Quicksand, and some stories. So that is perfect. Thank you, Erica. This is published by Anchor Books. So again, it includes Passing, it includes Quicksand, which I believe is on Scribd on audio, Freedom, and The Wrong Man. Really looking forward to this. I thought Nella Larsen's writing in Passing was absolutely fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to exploring her work further. And it has blurbs from Alice Walker and Maya Angelou on the front. Maya Angelou says, discovering the complete fiction of Nella Larsen is like finding lost money with no name on it. One can enjoy it with delight and share it without guilt. So really looking forward to this. Again, no rush on it. Whenever I get to the rest of Nella Larsen's work, I will get to it, and that will be fine. Let's do the beginning of the first story in here, which is called The Wrong Man. The room blazed with color. It seemed that the gorgeous things which the women were wearing had for this once managed to subdue the strident tones of the inevitable black and white of the men's costumes. Tonight they lent just enough of the preciseness to add interest to the riotously hued scene. The place was crowded but cool, for a gentle breeze blew from the sound through the large open windows and doors, now and then stirring some group of flowers. And that is the first story in the complete fiction of Nella Larsen. Really looking forward to that. So there you have it. Those are the books that I brought into my library in the month of February. And again, it's a lot of books, but 4 of them were sent to me in a trade, and I used gift card money on a bunch of them. And I think all of them still pretty much fit in that spirit of being really intentional. All of the ones that I purchased, at least, because many of them are for my reading challenge for this year, so I'm still hoping to get to them. Those are Tin Man, The 30 Names of Night, Don't Cry for Me, Alec, Call Us What We Carry. All of those are things that I'm pretty committed to reading this year. So that's 5 books out of this, and then I really want to get to Gordo at a minimum. All the ones that Erica sent me are library builders, so I'm fine having them. The only surprise was Waiting for Eden by Elliot Ackerman, which I trust Chelsea's recommendation. She knows me pretty well. She's done right for me in the past, so I am very eager to see what I think of that. And it's a small book, and I had gift card money, so why not? So that's probably the only one that really falls out of the realm of being really intentional. It was a very spur-of-the-moment purchase, but I'm okay with it. So it's more books than I did last month, but I'm really excited about all of these. And if you have thoughts about any of them, I'd love to hear it in the comment section down below. Recommendations based on any of these. If you've read some of them and would like to tell me about it, please, no spoilers, but let me know in the comment section down below. And as always, I really appreciate your time and your thoughts. I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.